we have a number of volunteers that set up today. I want to first of all thank my wife for making the salad, and Susan, Marilyn, Fernando, Jorge, Zenaida, Emily, Coach Terry got here, and I just want to thank all of you for getting here. Did everyone get enough food today? If you want any to go, we'll wrap some up and eat whatever we have left over. Today I'm just so happy to have my good friend Ray Johnston come and share with you. Ray and I have known each other since junior high. We played high school ball together, varsity basketball and things in high school, and then the intramurals in college and rec leagues and all kinds of things. But Ray and I went to 2 different colleges together, and then later seminary. We co-pastored a church, and God's really used him. I always knew that God would use him on a national. I didn't expect an international level, but he's spoken to over 2 million people. He has a church of 20,000. Started from, I remember, Ray, when you were starting that church, it was really an act of faith, and he just amazing what God's done there. Another thing about Ray, the thing I like about Ray is even though he's had all the success, Ray is Ray, and he just kind of is who he is and doesn't put on a bunch of airs like some people that are so successful. I really appreciate that about him so much. I guess my son was about almost 4 years old, and Ray and I were praying with some other pastors, and Jonathan, my son, came in, and Ray said, Ray was saying, Jonathan, you can pray that God gives me a wife. And then he said, Jonathan, how can I pray for you? And Jonathan said, well, you can pray that God gives me a train. And Ray said, well, if he gives me a wife, I'll buy you a train. And sure enough, when he got married, Ray bought him a little train. Anyway, he's just that kind of guy. Ray, come and share your heart with us.
So wear this?
Yeah. Good luck.
No kidding. Where do you want to put it on?
There, about there. All righty.
All right. Hey, well, first of all, do I need this? First of all, hi. I am really glad to be here. And Jim, thank you for that introduction. I'm going to play it for my wife. It is great to be overrated, number one. Secondly is this. I grew up, well, I'll tell you the story later, but Jim is the guy that led me to Christ. And so if it weren't for Jim, I would be wealthier, less stressed, and so thanks a lot. And actually, but it's funny. When your church grows, somehow everybody assumes it's you, and it's actually God and a ton of other people. But somebody asked me, they said, like, okay, who's your model pastor? In my opinion, Jim Schibsted is the single best definition of a pastor that I have ever met. Okay, he does. You judge people by the way they live, by the way they love, and by the way they laugh. And I can't think of anybody that does all 3 better than Jim. Would you all agree? Those of you know them, okay? And the other thing is this: Jim's got this great heart for people. How many churches I pull in? I've never been here before because I've never been invited, Jim. I pull in here and there's a sign of how many churches meet here? 6 churches. Okay, way to go. So, Jim, first of all, thanks for changing my entire eternal destiny. Without you, I have no idea where I would be, but it certainly isn't here. Okay. Second thing I want to say is, where's Jack? Jack, you're 96. Yes. I was sitting there watching this, going, I would love to look that good when I'm 96, but I don't look that good now. So, and that was really funny, by the way. That little off color, but really funny. The other thing I want to say is we have some friends here at this table. We haven't seen each other forever, and this is like a gigantic reunion. So this is going to be one of my highlight days. Let me tell you what I'm doing now, and then I'm going to back up and give you a little bit of my story and then get off here fast so you're not bored. Right now, I live in Northern California. I I pastor a church called Bayside. I did not want to be a pastor. You have to be crazy to be a pastor. It's I call them the 3 A's. You get too much attention, too much affection, and too much attack, and I didn't want anything to do with that. So I was writing books, traveling, speaking at all these conferences, training leaders, and then I live in a town called Granite Bay, and there were 2 copycat suicides of teenagers 25 years ago, and the 4 people began to pray that God would raise up a church that would attract teenagers and reach teenagers. And they came to me and said, hey, would you be the pastor of this? Start it. And I said, no. You know that verse in the Bible says, Lord, here am I, send somebody else? I applied that verse, okay? And these people, do you have anybody that bugs you and bugs you and bugs you? Okay, these people came out, for 6 months, they were on my back, sending me stuff. Anybody here remember what a fax is? Well, this group, you'll all know what a fax is, and an 8-track. So I actually have a fax note that says, to Ray Johnston from God regarding the church, plant the stupid church. I kept that fax, okay? And now, I never had the guts, this is embarrassing, I never had the guts to tell anybody why I didn't want to start this church. And I did not want to start this church because I was afraid. I was afraid we'd try to start a church and nobody'd come. I was afraid we'd try to start a church and people would come and I wouldn't like them. I was afraid we'd try to start a church and people would come but no help would come. I was afraid we'd try to start a church, people would come, help would come, we'd grow, but then we'd have to build a building, which means I'd have to raise money. How many of you love hearing the pastor talk about money? And I was like, I don't need anything to do with this. Now, I never had the guts to tell him why I didn't want to do it. So I just kept saying, the Lord hath not called his servant Ray to do this. So I was like, I'm skating on this thing. I'm not doing it. But they bugged us so much. After 6 months, I took the coward's way out. I said, okay, here's what we'll do. I will help you start your church. Okay. And as soon as it's up and rolling, we will call a pastor and I'll get out. And I said, but under no circumstances will I be the pastor of this church. So they're like, okay, good. We also decided we would start it. Like when people ask me what I do now, I say, I pastor a church for people that don't like church. Okay? That's the definition. We named it Bayside. We almost named it Baywatch. We went with Bayside. Okay? And we launched it 25 years ago, and it has blown. It's like nothing I've ever seen. But it's also basically a church for the rest of us. Like I walked out of the sermon a while back, and this courtyard, there's a few hundred people milling around this courtyard, and this guy yells from here to that back wall. He goes, "Hey, Ray!" I go, yeah, because you could tell it's brand new. He's got a Granite Bay golf shirt on. He's smoking a cigarette outside church. And he goes, that was a hell of a sermon. Okay? And Jim's here now. I know churches he'd be thrown out of, don't you? He fits right in at our church. I walked into church a while back. I look in the front row. The biggest guy I've ever seen is sitting in the front row. He has taken up half the front row. He's massive, okay? And I knew it was his first time at our church because he was wearing a tie. And he said, now I have no clue who this guy is, but he is massive. It's like the Hulk has come to church. The guy right next to him is sitting there. I know that guy. He's a football coach. And so they take up the front row, okay? And we worship and teach the Bible. That's kind of who we are. But at our the very first time we had a service, it's a standard service. We basically go, we're going to worship, teach the Bible. But I'm looking at this crowd and I go, I think a bunch of these people aren't Christians, because they were pretty sharp looking. And so I thought, I'm going to give an invitation and see what happens. So we gave an invitation. I did the same thing there, gave an invitation. I looked down. The Hulk has raised his paw, indicating he's given his life to Christ. So he goes out to the parking lot. They disappear. I'm getting ready for the 11:30 service. The football coach comes running backstage and he goes, did you see the guys that was with me this morning? And I go, everybody saw the guy that was with you this morning. He goes, do you know who that guy is? And I go, I got no idea. He said, he is the head bouncer at the largest nude bar in Sacramento. And I said, How do you know that? Whole nother conversation. Okay? So that's the church I pastor. It is packed with pagans, which I love. We got people in there all over the map. It is Teenageville 101, and it has been quite a ride so far. And so let me tell you how I got there. If you would have told anybody growing up, this is what I'd be doing, I would go, no. I grew up in an executive jet set Southern California home in Duarte. My dad was head of a company at age 40. Matter of fact, years ago, guys wanted to run him for governor of California. He turned them down, and they ran a guy named Ronald Reagan instead. Okay, and couldn't we all use him again? And so my dad, Chuck, that one was for you. So I grew up in there, and the problem was this: my dad, highly successful, my mom, they're just two amazing people, but they started drinking, and my mom became an alcoholic. My dad became an alcoholic rageaholic. Okay, and they were screaming it was so insane in my home. When I was a kid, I was the oldest. I had two younger sisters. They'd be going at it. It's 3 a.m. We'd wake up, things would be thrown, crashing, all this stuff. They're screaming at each other. I would take the window out. I would open the window. I'd take the screen out, and I would get both my sisters out, and we would be walking the streets at 1, 2, or 3 until everything died down and we could get back in the house. It was insane way to grow up. My dad was an atheist. My mom was an agnostic atheist, I think. So my entire religious training is God does not exist. And I actually went that direction. When I was in high school, I read books like Inherit the Wind. I read all the stuff. By the way, atheism's on the march again. And I went down that road. When I was 18 years old, I talked a guy out of becoming a Christian, which does not look good on a pastor's resume. But I'm having a great time sort of living that deal. And I go on a high school basketball team, and Jim Schibsted and I are on the same basketball team. And he cons me into going to this church, in a Congregational church called Lake Avenue Congregational Church. Anybody been there in Pasadena? Okay, yeah, a bunch of us were influenced big time by that place. And I'm like, I'm not going to some stupid church with all these dumb church people. And Jim's like, the high school man, they have 200 gorgeous girls. You got to come. So I felt led to go check it out. And to be really honest with you, I walked in for the first time, and it blew every stereotype I had about church. Wouldn't you agree? Our media does it. Paints horrible pictures of us. Would you agree? I walked in and went, these people are sharp. They're alive. There's something here. And the other thing I thought is, how can all these really sharp people believe such stupid stuff? Okay? And it took me 6 to 8 months of asking questions, reading. I read everything you can read. I will remember this as a water tank up by where Jim lived. It was just me by myself, and I'm walking around this water tank at about midnight, and I'm going, all right, let me unpack this, okay? And here's how I'd come a ways by then, because I'm walking around going, okay, human beings are personal. Wouldn't you agree? Okay? And so I got, okay, human beings are personal. That's true, okay? Now, you cannot get life from non-life. Would you agree? Like, you can take these books, put these books together, they're not going to create a life because they're not alive, which means if something is going to be alive, it has to be created by something that's alive, okay? And also, if something's personal, it has to be created by something that's personal. Make sense? That's about as far as I got. And then I started studying all this evidence for the resurrection, and a terrible thing happened one day. I woke up, and intellectually, it was 51 to 49. I was going, oh no, I now believe more than I don't believe. It has taken much more blind faith to hold on to atheism. By the way, if there's an atheist in there, I would love to meet you afterwards, because you have insane levels of crazy faith to believe that this stuff came from nothing. And so, because I was that guy, and so I went, oh, and then it took a while longer, and I ended up. It was funny. I was at Lake Avenue one morning, and I went to the 9:45 service. Jim hauled me in there. And by this point, I went, okay, I now believe. And I had kind of decided, the second I believe, I'm in. Okay? But matter of fact, this whole room is in 2 categories. And you can tell who you are by how you get in a swimming pool. How many of you are like my wife? You go in like one toe, and then your whole ankle, and then 30 minutes later, you go into your knees, and 30 minutes you're like this, and you're miserable for 30 minutes, especially when you get about, how many of you know what I'm talking about? Okay. How many of you, that's you? Okay. Really, I wouldn't expect that from a football coach. The other way you get in a pool is cannonball. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay. And I pretty much decided, look, it took me a long time because I went, if the evidence is not intellectually on the side of this, I am not in. Okay. The heart can't rejoice in something the mind rejects as false. Okay. But if the minute I'm in, I'm in. I go to a service with Jim at Lake Avenue that they did something they've never done. They give one of those come forward invitations. It wasn't like one of those wimpy raise your hand things. It was like, get up, come out of your seats, the buses will wait, come forward. Okay. I sit there and I don't move. I went back to the 11:30 service and sat through the whole stupid service again just to get up, and about 200 other people came to the front, and I looked down, and Jim's younger brother is standing right next to me. I had no idea he was in the building, okay? And at that point, I think he was in 8th grade, and he tugs and he goes, hey, Ray, you're here too. And I go, yeah, hard to believe, huh? And Jim's brother is now a pastor, okay? And so what happened is I gave my life to Christ at that point, and I kind of want to wrap this up. And who do I turn it over to when I'm done? Chuck. Oh, there it goes. What Chuck told me to keep this short, so I am. Really?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. Well, I'll take some questions then. How's that?
You got to talk about the mall too. The mall that got burnt down.
Oh, okay. Oh, that'd be a good idea. So what happened is,
I know his story.
we go to the mall, and here's what let me make a really politically incorrect statement. Is that okay here?
Sure.
Good. Okay. The Christian church is getting beat up. Would you agree? Yeah. Beat up by the full confession. And I know this is politically incorrect, and some of you aren't going to like this, but here we go. I love the Christian church. And I am not apologizing for that one bit. I love the Christian church because it was the Christian church that introduced me to Jesus. When I was talking against people, I don't believe in this stuff. It was the Christian church that challenged me to grow. It was a guy named John Archer that we were all impacted by at Lake Avenue and the people at that table and Jim. It was the Christian church. It was the Christian church that challenged me to grow, taught me the Bible. It was the Christian church that shaped my life. It was the Christian church that healed. By the way, the Christian church helped me hear the call of God for my life. It also helped me figure out what I shouldn't be doing. Okay, you all lead in worship. That was amazing. Okay, I became a youth pastor. I bought a guitar. Back in the 80s, I learned the 3 chords that you needed to lead every song. And I got up. The church had a Sunday night service, and the pastor was like, "Hey, nobody comes to this thing. It's low risk. Why don't you lead worship?" So I get up. And I'm leading worship. And I prepped this song. I get up. There's like 50 people in the building. Somebody was on a piano. She turns to another song. Somebody's on an overhead projector. You know what those are? And remember the song slide days on those things? They're on that. Somebody put the wrong song on the projector. She's singing the third song. And halfway through this song, people are laughing so hard, we gave up. So I said, hey, you want to try another one? Same thing happened. The tape sales of that service skyrocketed for comedy reasons afterwards. Okay, and I gave my guitar again and have never led worship again to the glory of God. Why is that a big deal? It was the Christian church helped me figure out what I shouldn't do. It makes sense, but here's the big one for me is this: it was the Christian church that healed my image of God and healed my image of myself. And most importantly, at this point, healed my image of marriage. Okay, my mom and dad blew their marriage apart, and they got divorced. Okay, now their divorce was no big surprise to anybody because if you go back in my family tree, okay, both sets of grandparents were divorced. Both sets of their parents were divorced. We had people in my family getting divorced when it wasn't even popular. My mom had 3 sisters, married, divorced. married, divorced. One of them married and divorced 3 times. One of her marriages lasted 3 days. And it's like, I do, I don't. And I've got sisters. One of them married, divorced, married, divorced, married, divorced. The other one just doesn't get married. And if you go back 100 and we good? If you go back 150 years in my family tree, 150 years, there is not one lasting marriage, not one. Last year, my wife and I celebrated our 38th wedding anniversary. Okay, and the reason that's a big deal is this: we now have the longest running marriage in the history of my family tree. And I owe it all. So when people get up and they go, oh, I just don't think Jesus Christ, the Bible, or a church makes any difference. You go, are you kidding me? All you got to do is take out a copy of my family tree. Jesus Christ, the Bible, and church broke 140 years of past patterns. We took my family tree, we cut it down, and we're just using the kindling to build a whole new family tree and a whole new future for everybody. Okay. I also want to say this. Okay. No matter, there is nothing in your background. Nothing in your background that can stop God from doing something good in your future. Okay? I mean, past failure. Anybody got a bunch of that? Yeah, me too. That can't stop you because forgiveness is available. Okay? I mean, some of you blown up a marriage, some of you blown up a life, some of you are having a terrible time overcoming internet addiction or something else. There is nothing in your future and nothing in your past that can stop God from doing something great in your future. My life verse is out of the book of Philippians, which is a 4-chapter book written to people named Philip. And in Philippians chapter 1, verse 6, the Apostle Paul writes these words. He says, I am confident, which everybody needs these days, I am confident of this very thing, God, who began a good work in you, and you wouldn't be here if that weren't true, will continue it and perfect it until the day of Jesus Christ. Make sense? So I have like 7 minutes, right? You want the mall thing? Okay, good. So here's the deal. Gosh, these are all embarrassing stories. So we launched this church called Bayside up there. It explodes, and at this point, and a few years ago, Saddleback and Bayside are the 2 biggest churches in California, and we have multiple campuses, all this kind of stuff. And I do a lot of mentoring of pastors, and so I bring a bunch of pastors down to Newport Beach to mentor them at a round table for 2.5 days, because it's always God's will to go to Newport Beach. And can I get an amen from anybody on this? Yeah, or Anaheim. And so I'm down there, and just one of the pastors, I said, hey, tomorrow morning, just lead a quick devotional. I've never recovered. I'm in a room, and these pastors are all there. I'm sitting in the back, and this guy just does a simple Bible study on Acts chapter 2. And he reads these verses. He said, Acts 2, he goes, this is how the early church lived, evidently. He said, selling their possessions and goods, they gave to anyone who had needs. And he just goes, evidently the early church started by selling stuff and giving the money away. So he wrote to this, he said a little board, he scratched out, and he wrote down the words, good deeds. Then 2 verses later, he says, look what happens. He said, those good deeds, he said they had favor with God and all the people. Do Christians have favor with people right now? Not a chance. He said, evidently their good deeds led to goodwill. And then the very next verse says, and the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. And he wrote down good news. And I sat there, I actually started crying. I went, in the book of Acts, good deeds led to good will, which led to openness to the good news. And like almost every single one of the 360,000 churches in America, we have been delivering the good news without good deeds, so there's no goodwill. But it looks successful. And I was so convicted. I am actually crying in this room. And I walked out. I called some staff guys, and I said, I don't care if it wrecks our church. We will do this way. We will flip everything down if everybody leaves. I don't care. And it game changed everything. Like, for example, we the first thing we did, we said, let's give up one Sunday a year. Okay. So one Sunday a year, we unleash a thing called Serve Day. And we tell people you can't come to church. We're all going to serve. We interview every mayor, every principal and everybody that works with the poor. And last time we did this, we had about 167 projects. We unleashed 10,000 people to go serve the entire community. Okay. Another way, and I'll wrap up with this, Chuck. Another way it happened is this: years ago, probably about a decade ago, we have a nearby mall. It's kind of like the mall, and Nordstrom's, Anchors, and all this kind of stuff. It was attacked by a terrorist, and he tried to burn the mall down. And he was successful in burning about a fourth of it down. Now, after reading Acts, we're like, okay, who's going to be hurt? Let's get everybody sell some stuff and let's give them money. So I called the mall and we called the mayors of Roseville and we said, who's going to be hurt? And they said, well, the stores are going to be fine. They all got insurance. The full-time people are all going to be fine. They said, the people that are going to be really hurt by this are the day laborers, most of them Spanish speaking, some of them here illegally, and they and their kids are going to be in severe crisis. They have no safety net. And so I got up in front of church and I said, hey, we are taking a second offering. And I said, how many of you don't even like the first offering? Okay. I said, we're taking a second offering this morning. We take second offerings now at Bayside all the time. Our only rule is we give it all away. I said, we're not keeping a dime of this. We're taking a second offering to give this money to these people. And what happened is our people gave it was right around $148,000 in a second offering. So we met with Roseville, Rockland mayors, and we met with the mall, and it was awesome. We kept all those people in their apartments, paid their rent, paid their utilities, kept their kids in school, bought them school clothes, backpacks, and all those supplies for a year and a half until the mall reopened. The mall reopens the next year, Christmas is coming, and about a month after Christmas, the mall calls us and says, hey, would Bayside like to partner with us on some stuff? We're like, yeah, what do you want? Okay. And the mall said, well, we're going to do an ice skating rink. Would you all like to pay for it and sponsor it? We're like, yep, we're in. Okay. Then they said, and we have an empty store next to Nordstrom's right now. Would you all like to use that store for something that would serve our customers? So we set up get this, moms, we set up a drop and shop. Drop your kids off for 3 hours for free, go shopping without your kids, and our whole children's ministry team ran a day camp in there and led all those kids to Christ. Okay. And then we said, well, why don't we, for all these parents, let's set up free gift wrapping in the middle of the mall, and if they want to make a donation, it doesn't go to us. We set up 5 community causes that they do this. All this gets set up in early November. They leak this information based on the mall or partnering up. If you're a mom, it's going to be a break, all of this kind of stuff. What happens is the Sacramento Atheist Organization found out that the mall was partnering with our church, and they called the mall to protest. And the mall said, when we were firebombed, we never heard from you. This church cares about the community in ways you don't. We're sticking with the church, so if you're going to picket us, go after it. We're following through with this plan. And I was like, good. You know what the saying is? The way God worked in the Bible is the way He still works now. Good deeds still lead to good will, which leads to openness to the good news. Okay, and I actually think this: if all 360,000 churches in America ever shut down on the same weekend, and that became a national movement, it would change what we were known for. We would stop being the judgmental, critical jerks that everybody thinks we are, and they would be going, man, these are the people that care about the community. So, by the way, we good?
Ray, take some questions, please. Anybody have a question? How many campuses?
We've launched we've launched 27 churches, but we have 6 of them that are us. And so the 6 of them, we just launched one in Newport Beach. Vanguard University called us and said, would you plant one on our campus? Okay. And it's a subsidiary of this church. And so that's how. By the way, the other thing is this: how many of you live in California? Awesome. Good job. How many of you know people that are Christians and like, and they ran out of California? Anybody know these people? Okay. I'm so fed up with that. We have just set a new goal to launch 100 churches. By the way, AD 2033 is the 2000th anniversary of the resurrection. We have just set up a goal to launch 100 churches in 10 years. 90 of it in the state of California, and we are going to recruit people from Tennessee and Texas to move here. Okay? So, that'll be good. Okay? So, any other questions? Go in.
There's a question, right? I have a friend that's just got ordained as a minister. How does he start a church?
How do you start a church? The best thing to do is to go to a church assessment center to find out. There are some really great people that will help you figure out if you're wired to launch a church or if you're wired to go into one that already exists. Okay. And so the first thing I do with the assessment center, and the other thing I'd say is this. My main COVID learning was COVID was a disaster. For a lot of stuff got killed other than COVID, other than people by COVID. Wouldn't you agree? COVID killed hope. It killed people's futures. It killed it. And by the way, we have a conference called Thrive. This is an indirect answer to your question. We had to cancel our Thrive conference, and I was devastated. I got discouraged and stayed discouraged, and I wrote this book on hope. And I'm in the backyard, and God said to me, if you will let go of discouragement and replace it with dreaming, anything can be better. So what I would say to this person is, usually nothing great happens through you until it happens in you. So I would concentrate on making sure this person is putting themselves in places where there's training, there's encouragement, because the more great stuff going on in whoever this is life, the better whatever their launch is going to be. So, and that's an indirect thing. There's all kinds of, I have an 8-hour training course for people planting churches, but really something good's got to be going on the inside. So,
Ray, your daughter asked you a question, 20 questions one time, and you got to the 20th question, and that really struck a chord to you. Could you share that?
yeah. Who's got kids in here? Who had teenagers or has teenagers? Anybody? Okay, so my daughter Leslie, Carol and I have 4 kids. We have 2 boys. Thought we were done. Then she contracted pregnancy a 3rd time. And at this point, I'm a professor in Chicago. I come home. She's gone to find out if it was a boy or a girl because we're hoping for one or the other. And I meet her at the door, and she goes, "We better go in the back bedroom." I'm thinking, that's how we got here in the first place, but all right. So, kind of like your jokes. And so I sit down and she goes, "Here." And I open up, it's double mint chewing gum. We had 4 kids under 4. Just not God's will. And 2 of the 4 are off parole now, so we're feeling better. But my daughter Leslie came home and she said, I have to write a paper on a leader. I picked you, and the professor said, Professor okayed it, knows who you are. And she said, I have 20 questions, and you have to answer them all honestly. And if you want to do that with your kid, so we have a hot tub in the backyard. So I thought, let's just go sit in the jacuzzi because I'm going to end up in hot water. Why not just start there? So we sit down there, and we talked for 2 hours. It was awesome. She's just sharp. Her last question was her best question. She looked at me and she said, "What's the most important thing you do as a leader?" What's the most important thing you do as a Christian, as a leader, as a husband, as a wife, as a parent, as a grandparent? What is the single most important thing you do? And I looked at her and said, that's easy. By far, the most important thing I do is this. This will change your life. Make sure I stay encouraged. And you're all looking at me like she did. You're kidding, right? The cover to cover. All you have to do is talk to any counselor. Discouragement precedes destruction. Discouragement precedes destruction. I can't find anything that was destroyed, a marriage, whatever, without discourage. No young guy's ever come up to me and said, I'm so encouraged about my marriage, I'm getting a divorce. Nobody's ever come up and said, I'm so encouraged about our relationship with God, I'm walking away from the faith. I'm so encouraged about school, I'm dropping out. I'm so encouraged, you know what I mean? The discouragement, we have a definition of discouragement we use at Bayside. Discouragement is the anesthetic that the devil uses on a person just before he reaches in, carves out their heart, and wrecks their future. And so it may be that God brought you here today just to hear that. The single most important thing you do in all of life is to make sure you stay encouraged. Because when your encouragement level rises, that leads to hope. And when hope rises, anything's possible. Make sense? Thanks for having me here, everybody. God bless.
God bless you.
Great job. Thank you.
I've been having fun. Pastor Jim gave me 2 books. I said, Ray's written a couple of books, and he says, yeah, I've got a couple. So I've been reading this one night, and then I read this book the other night. And gentlemen, it's such a pleasure.
Is that so you can go to sleep?
Everybody's welcome to come back next month. And Larry Day, will you stand up? This is the Christian Cowboy. And he gave an incredible Easter service and had an altar call, and 3 of the horses came forward. God bless everybody. Thanks for coming. I hope you enjoyed. If you didn't enjoy it, you're in trouble.
Good job, Chuck.
Bless.